Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Voters went to the polls Tuesday in 5 states. Maine, Nevada, North Dakota, and South Carolina all held primaries. A special House election also took place in Texas. In South Carolina, 5-term Republican Congressmember Tom Rice was soundly defeated in his Republican primary. Rice was one of just 10 Republicans who'd voted to impeach Donald Trump last year after the January 6th insurrection. Another Republican incumbent in South Carolina, Nancy Mace, survived a primary challenge from a Trump-backed candidate. But last year, Mace, though she criticized Trump after the insurrection, later campaigned in the primary on a pro-Trump message. She even recorded a campaign video outside Trump Tower in February. Meanwhile, in Nevada, Republicans who supported Trump's coup attempt won the primaries for Senate and Secretary of State. With his victory in Nevada's Republican Senate primary, Adam Laxalt will now face Democratic Senator Catherine Cortez Masto in a race that could determine which party controls the U.S. Senate. Laxalt co-chaired Trump's 2020 campaign in Nevada and led efforts to overturn Joe Biden's election win in the state. Meanwhile, Republicans in Nevada picked Jim Marchant to be their candidate for Secretary of State. He's an election denier who was urged to run for office by a prominent backer of the QAnon conspiracy theory. Marchant is a leader of an alliance known as America First, which helps backers of Trump's coup attempt to run for top election offices. According to the Washington Post, more than 100 Republicans who backed Trump's election fraud claims have already won primaries this year. In another closely watched race, Republican Mayra Flores won a special election for an open House seat in South Texas, which had been held by a Democrat for the past 10 years. Flores, who was born in Mexico and is married to a Border Patrol agent, outspent her closest Democratic rival by a margin of 16-1. House Select Committee investigating the January 6th insurrection appears divided on whether the panel should make criminal referrals of Donald Trump or anyone else to the Justice Department. On Monday, the committee's chair, Benny Thompson, said that is not our job. But the committee's vice chair, Republican Lynn Cheney, said the committee has not issued a conclusion regarding potential criminal referrals. Another member of the committee, Congressmember Elaine Luria, tweeted, "If criminal activity occurred, it's our responsibility to report that activity to the DOJ," unquote. The committee was scheduled to hold its 3rd public hearing today, but it was postponed. The committee has teased the Thursday hearing by releasing a short video of former White House lawyer Eric Hirschman recalling a conversation he had January 7th, 2021, with John Eastman, the conservative lawyer who helped craft Trump's legal effort to overturn the 2020 election. Attorney Hirschman told the January 6th committee Eastman called him a day after the deadly insurrection to discuss more ways to overturn the election. Hirschman described how the call ended.
I said to him, "Are you out of your effing mind?" Right? I said, I only want to hear 2 words coming out of your mouth from now on. Orderly transition. Now I'm going to give you the best free legal advice you're ever getting in your life. Get a great effing criminal defense lawyer. You're going to need it. And then I hung up on him.
NATO defense ministers have begun a 2-day meeting in Brussels to discuss sending more heavy weapons and missile systems to Ukraine as fighting rages on in eastern Ukraine. On Tuesday, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky called for more arms and anti-missile defense systems to combat Russian attacks. Meanwhile, Pope Francis has condemned what he described as the cruelty of Russian troops in Ukraine. But the Pope also suggested the war had been provoked. He said, quote, "We do not see the whole drama unfold behind this war, which was perhaps somehow either provoked or not prevented," the Pope said. This comes as a Pentagon official has publicly said the Biden administration is not pushing Ukraine to hold talks to end the war. Colin Kahl, the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, said, quote, "We're not going to tell the Ukrainians how to negotiate, what to negotiate, and when to negotiate," unquote. Meanwhile, former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev has posted a message on Telegram suggesting Ukraine will not exist on world maps in 2 years. In related news, some Biden administration officials are now privately expressing concern that Western sanctions on Russia may be backfiring. That's according to a report in Bloomberg, which says the officials fear the sanctions are, quote, exacerbating inflation, worsening food insecurity, and punishing ordinary Russians more than Putin or his allies. The White House has formally announced President Biden will visit Saudi Arabia next month, as well as Israel and the occupied West Bank. Biden's expected to meet with both Saudi King Salman and the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. As a candidate, Biden pledged to make Saudi Arabia a pariah following the brutal assassination of Washington Post Jamal Khashoggi. But the president has taken a different stance in recent months as global gas prices soared. The talks in Saudi Arabia are expected to focus on oil production, the war in Yemen, and other regional issues. Some Democratic lawmakers, including Senator Dick Durbin, are criticizing Biden's decision to travel to Saudi Arabia. This comes as average gas prices in the United States have topped $5 a gallon for the first time ever. The Associated Press is reporting President Biden has just written a letter to U.S. oil refiners calling on them to work with the administration to produce more gasoline and diesel. In the letter, Biden points out oil profits have tripled in a time of war while consumers are facing record prices at the pump. We'll have more on Saudi Arabia and President Biden's decision to meet with Mohammed bin Salman later in the broadcast. The Federal Reserve is expected to issue today its largest interest rate hike since 1994 to combat rising inflation. This comes as the S&P 500 dropped nearly 4% Tuesday. The stock index has fallen by 20% since January. President Biden traveled to Philadelphia Tuesday to address members of the AFL-CIO, blaming Republican lawmakers for blocking his plan to fight inflation. His appearance before the AFL came as union delegates elected Liz Shuler to become the AFL-CIO's first female president and Fred Redmond to be its first African-American secretary-treasurer. We'll have more on Biden's speech and the labor movement later in the broadcast. The European Court of Human Rights blocked Britain from deporting a handful of asylum seekers to Rwanda on Tuesday. The court issued an injunction in the case of an Iraqi national who was on the verge of being flown to Rwanda. Prior to the ruling, a group of activists attempted to stop the deportations by locking themselves together to block a road near the jail where the asylum seekers are being held. None of them are from Rwanda. Indigenous-led protests in Ecuador have intensified after the police arrested Leonidas Ianza, the head of the Confederation of Indigenous Nationalities of Ecuador, the country's largest indigenous organization. Ianza's arrest Tuesday came a day after he helped launch a nationwide strike to protest Ecuadorian President Guillermo Lasso's economic policies and rising fuel prices. Ianza spoke out on Monday prior to his arrest.
Yes, indeed, we had to resort to resistance because the national government has deepened, or rather continued with the policies of former President Lenin Moreno, putting in place more and more policies of death, which don't allow us to sustain our small economies.
In Brazil, police have arrested a second suspect connected to the disappearance of British journalist Dom Phillips and the Brazilian indigenous expert Bruno Araújo Pereira. The pair went missing over a week ago in one of Brazil's most remote areas of the Amazon. On Tuesday, indigenous activists gathered in Brazil's capital, Brasilia, to demand justice for the missing men.
We are here to defend life. Indigenous people's lives, to defend the environment and claiming for justice for our missing friends. We want answers, and this is why we came here, to the Ministry of Justice.
And the longtime firebrand labor rights activist Charlie Corrigan has died at the age of 74. He spent decades exposing how corporations sold products made in overseas sweatshops. His investigations exposed the sweatshop practices of numerous companies, including Gap, Microsoft, Disney, Nike, Target, Kmart, and Levi Strauss. In 1996, Charlie Corrigan made national headlines when he revealed a clothing line by TV host Kathie Lee Gifford was being made by girls as young as 15 in Honduras who worked up to 70 hours a week for 31 cents an hour. Charlie Corrigan appeared many times on Democracy Now!
We found documents in a garbage dump for Nike, and it was children's sweatshirts. And the sweatshirt sold for $22.99. This was in the Dominican Republic, and we bought it at Macy's in New York City. Do you know what the workers got paid to make that sweatshirt? 8 cents. So the workers' wages in the Dominican Republic were 0.3% of the retail price. This is what's going on. They're just crushing people and sucking really the blood out of people. 8 cents to make the garment. What would happen if they tripled it to 24 cents? That would be less than 1% of the retail price of the garment. In other words, there's plenty of room here, but this is the science of exploitation and misery. And we have to stand up and push back against these corporations.
Again, Charlie Corrigan has died at the age of 74. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman in New York, joined by Democracy Now! Co-host Juan Gonzalez in New Brunswick, New Jersey. Hi, Juan.
Hi, Amy, and welcome to all of our listeners and viewers across the country and around the world.